Hello and welcome to another episode of Boring History. Now, as I'm sure you can figure by the title of this video, I had initially planned to make this particular video right at the beginning of the new year. But it's been like 35, 40 degrees here, which is like 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And to be honest, I just couldn't bring myself to sit down and film this video. But that doesn't matter because it means that today, after we're all rested from our super fantastic New Year's celebrations, we can sit down and relax and travel back 4,000 years into the past and hear all about the ancient Babylonian New Year's celebrations. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, because these celebrations happened in ancient Babylon, there are a few key differences to our modern New Year's celebrations. For starters, these celebrations occurred in late March or early April. And let's be honest, the whole 1st of January thing is such a modern concept anyway. The Babylonians celebrated their new year on the first full moon of the Vernal Equinox. The Vernal Equinox is a very special day where day and night are of equal length. And let's just take a moment to fully appreciate just how clever these ancient Babylonians would have had to have been to be able to work this out without all the assistance of modern technology. But anyway, in Babylon, all of this occurred during a month that was known as Nisanu. And the Babylonians celebrated the arrival of the new year and the rebirth of the world with a festival known as Akitu, or the Feast of Akitu. And this festival actually gets its name from the temple in ancient Babylon where this celebration or this festival took place. Well, actually, this celebration took place in two main locations, the temple and a place or a house that was called the House of the New Year. There were also two main gods who featured in this celebration, the god Nabu and his father Marduk. Marduk was the patron god of Babylon. He was the supreme ruler, the god of the entire universe. And he also had some special powers like regeneration. Now, it was believed that during these New Year celebrations, Marduk and all of the gods would assemble in Babylon. And Marduk would once again be declared king of the universe, and he would make all of the predictions for the coming year. The Akitu Festival ran for 11 days, and on each of the 11 days, a different ritual or celebration would be performed. Now, I just need to point out that some of the books or the articles that I was reading actually say that the festival ran for 12 days. And just because this is going on the internet, I feel like here's a good point to make a disclaimer that I by no means am an expert on the Babylonians, and in fact I am rather simplifying their beliefs for this particular video. If you yourself happen to be an expert, or if you just know a lot about the Babylonians and you would like to expand on anything I say, please by all means feel free to do that in the comment section down below, because the Babylonians are absolutely fascinating and I'm always really happy to learn more about them. But anyway, let's get back to the Akitu Festival. The festival was also split into two parts, or two halves I guess we could say. The first half was more private and it involved people celebrating amongst themselves with their friends and family. And then the second half was the big public celebration that involved banquets and processions and public rituals. Now, there were a couple of important components to this public part of the celebration. The first of them involved an idol or a statue of the god Marduk. And this idol would be paraded all around the city, and it would go from the temple to the House of the New Year. And then the second super important component of this festival would be the king. Why? Well, because he's the king, and so obviously he had to be invited. But also because mere mortals obviously couldn't see the gods, so there had to be somebody who ruled on behalf of the gods, and that somebody was the king. He was the physical representation of the gods, and he also got to do quite a few little fun rituals during these New Year celebrations. One of these rituals involved a priest slapping the king across his face. It was supposed to be like a sign of humility. The king would also spend a night at the temple, and upon entering the temple, the king would lay down all of his weapons, his crown, and a special scepter that the priest had given him at the beginning of the festival. Stripped bare, the king would then kneel before the statue of Marduk and perform an oath. The king would then receive an oracle that essentially just told him that his life for the next year was going to be amazing. He would then get back his crown and all of his other stuff, and then the rest of the festival and the rituals and the celebrations could all continue. Oh, and apparently on the night of his sleepover at the temple, there was another ritual, one which involved a white bull, the king, and the priest. The only thing is that nobody knows exactly what happened during this ritual. Now, the temple and the priests also had a pretty important role to play during the Akitu Festival. The temple and the priests would undergo a full cleansing, and then sacred herbs would be sprinkled all around the place, and of course, animals would be sacrificed. And to be honest, there are actually quite a lot of components to the Akitu Festival which to this day are still unknown. But essentially, the general gist was that there was singing, dancing, sacrifices, and some walking from point A to point B. And it was also thought that these celebrations had to happen at the beginning of each year, or else the following year would be a complete disaster and completely inauspicious. And there's one more component of this festival that we have to cover. At the beginning of each year, the Babylonians would recount their creation myth, which is called Enuma Elish. And I wholly accept that I've probably pronounced that entirely wrong. But that doesn't matter, because what does matter is that we get to hear an epic story. This story is thought to be one of the oldest in the whole wide world, and it shares with us the creation of the universe. In the beginning, there was nothing but water which swirled chaotically, until one day the water split into two parts. The first half of this water was sweet and fresh and became known as the god Apsu. The other half of the water was salty and bitter and became known as the goddess Tiamat. Now, considering that these two entities were the only thing to exist in the whole entire universe, it meant that they didn't really have a lot to do. And so perhaps it comes as no surprise that after a certain amount of time, a lot of little younger gods started being birthed. I mean, Apsu and Tiamat had to pass the time somehow. But these younger gods were in absolute pain and had no manners, and they would just party all day and all night. And this really pissed off the god Apsu, because during the day he couldn't get done any work, and during the night he couldn't sleep. Eventually he gets so fed up that one of his visors, who also just pops up from somewhere, is like, Apsu, if you'd like to hear it, I've got an excellent plan. And Apsu is like, please, share your idea with me. At this stage, I'm open to absolutely anything. And the visor is like, well, this might be a little bit radical, but how about you kill all of the younger gods? Apsu is like, you're a genius. That is exactly what I'm going to do. Now, somehow Tiamat hears of this plan, and even though she's representative of salty and bitter water, she still has feelings. And she warns her eldest son, Enki, of his father's plan. Enki knocks out his father, or he gives him like a sleeping potion or something, and then when his father is passed out, he kills him instead. He then takes it one step further by making a house out of the corpse of his father. But who are we to judge the actions of the gods? Tiamat finds out that Apsu has been killed, and she gets super angry. She's like, I didn't mean for you to kill your father. I was just trying to give you a heads up so you would keep all your partying down. Use your inside voices, maybe go to bed at a reasonable hour. Why did you have to go and do the absolute extreme? And in her anger, she goes and talks to this other god who's a little bit older. I guess he's just popped up from somewhere as well. But his name is Kingu. Kingu is like, well, obviously justice has to be served and you have no choice but to wage war on these younger gods. Tiamat is like, that is a brilliant idea, and as thanks for your brilliant idea, please have these tablets of destiny which allow you to tell fortunes and probably do some other cool things. Kingu is like, sweet, cool, thanks, and he goes on to use the tablets as the breastplate of his armor. The war begins, and there are monsters and battles and champions, and then this guy or this god called Marduk appears, and he ends up defeating Kingu and killing Tiamat. And he doesn't just like stab her and be done with it. Oh no, he shoots her with an arrow and splits her into two. Water gushes from her eyes, and this water ends up forming the Tigris and the Euphrates River. And then Marduk uses the two parts of Tiamat's corpse to form heaven and earth. He's also worked out how to keep all of these younger gods busy and out of trouble. He assigns to each of them a duty and a role, and he's like, from now on, you are in charge of this piece of the world. And then Marduk takes the tablets of destiny from Kingu, and this legitimizes his rule as the one true supreme god. And it also explains why he can do all the fortune telling during the Akitu Festival. And just in case you're thinking that Kingu actually got let off a little bit lightly, don't worry, he didn't. He gets put on trial for war crimes, or actually I think it was for instigating a war. He's obviously found guilty, and then he's sentenced to death, killed, and from his blood, the first man is created. The end. And on that note, seeing as somebody is trying to clearly escape from this topic, I'm going to end today's video. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found it interesting. I think the Babylonians never really disappoint. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. Otherwise, I hope to see you for my next video, because I look forward to sharing even more boring history with you in the future.